Welcome. Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos. I'm a sociologist who's taught at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and Yeshiva University here in New York. The brand new Congress is an American political action committee formed by former staffers and supporters of the 2016 Bernie Sanders presidential campaign, designed to elect hundreds of new congressional representatives in line with the campaign's political platform. It's one of the most vibrant, hopeful, and important political formations in contemporary American life that's committed to the resuscitation and survival of our threatened democracy. It's a movement designed to radically imagine and bring about a moral, spiritual, economic, cultural, and political transformation of the country and the world. We're honored and blessed to have on the Radical Imagination today a number of candidates running for various congressional and legislative offices in New York City to form a brand new Congress. These include Samelys Lopez, Melanie, Emily Gallagher, Lauren Ashcraft, Mel Gagarin, Chowdhury Shaniyat, and Nuala. Welcome all to the Radical Imagination. Thank you all for being here. It really is an honor, and I'm so happy you're all here because you all are involved in incredibly important movement here that's trying to transform this country. So we want to give you a chance to imagine here that you're in the living room of your potential constituents, and you have a few minutes to talk with them intimately about who you are, what you're about, what you're trying to accomplish, why you're running, and so on. So, you want to be the first one, Laura?
Yes.
Give it a shot.
Yeah.
So here we are. Tell us a little about yourself. Tell all your constituents, potential constituents, why they should vote for you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me on. And again, like you mentioned, we are grassroots, progressive, people-powered candidates running for Congress because we are running against big money dictating how things go in our country. Mm-hmm. And I am running because I have this radical vision that every single person has full and equal representation. And that is not currently the case in this district, in New York's 12th district, or in the country. And my family is actually an example of what it means to have no representation. So on one side of my family, my grandfather was a coal miner and was literally killed by corporate greed in the Farmington mine disaster. And he left my grandmother, who was a Japanese immigrant, alone to feed her family with small Social Security checks. So when I hear about candidates and our administration proposing cuts to Social Security, that is something I take very personally. Yeah. And my family has survived unforeseeable circumstances because of Social Security. So my grandmother, again, was a Japanese immigrant, and while she was mourning and trying to survive and save her family, she was also facing a huge amount of xenophobia and racism. And actually, Melanie and I went to it was really upsetting to visit ICE detainees in New Jersey and to see how we treat people that seek a life in this country as anything but the Americans that they are is just really, really upsetting, and it shows that we haven't resolved that issue, and we need a fighter that's going to stand up for every single person in the exact same way that they deserve. And on the other side of my family, my grandfather unfortunately fell.
In the mines?
No.
Oh.
No. So he was killed. And on the other side of my family, my grandfather fell and unfortunately broke his neck and became a quadriplegic. So I grew up,
Wow.
yeah, I grew up just very aware of how people with disabilities go completely ignored by society and by representation. And whenever you're living off of Social Security disability, you are living in abject poverty. And a lot of people live off of something like $700 a month. Yeah. And in New York City, you absolutely cannot pay for your rent. You can't pay for food. You can't pay for a caretaker with that kind of money. So that's why everyone in my family stepped in and became my grandfather's caretaker, because that's the kind of country we live in, is one that doesn't look out for people that face unforeseeable circumstances. So I have grown up extremely angry because of the lack of representation that my family has faced. And I've become an activist, helped to plan the Women's March, and also I'm a stand-up comedian, so.
Great, all right, well.
Yeah, I've used stand-up comedy.
Hit us with any jokes you'd like to at some point, or not.
Thank you.
Stand-up comedian, so you use some of that anger
yes.
in a comedic way, perhaps, huh?
Yeah, I think comedians kind of see the world in a different view, and I've actually used my stand-up comedy to fundraise and recruit volunteers and raise awareness for nonprofits throughout my district that make our lives better
Wow.
and kind of fill the gaps of where the government should be taking care of us.
Right.
So we have funded soup kitchens and things like ACLU, Planned Parenthood, and organizations like California Wildfire Foundation, and helped out in the Flint water crisis. So we're filling in the gaps as a Collection Box Comedy, the show that I produce, where the government should be representing us, but they don't.
Not, yeah.
Yeah.
12th Congressional District, tell us where that is.
Yeah, so it's much of the east side of Manhattan.
Okay.
And Roosevelt Island, Western Queens, so parts of Astoria and Long Island City, and North Brooklyn, so parts of Greenpoint and Williamsburg.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's quite a diverse community that you're going to be representing.
It's amazing, and it's very diverse, and it's very millennial, which is exciting because I'm seeing so much of a movement for this people-powered representation, just really coming in strong behind all of us. And we had an amazing district attorney race. Tiffany Caban is somebody who really inspired me a lot, inspires me presently as well. But the way that my parts of Queens showed up for her is amazing. So there's really a movement that's being built around grassroots candidates like us. And I'm inspired every single day by the people that I meet. And have met people that are struggling literally to survive. I met somebody the other day that doesn't think that he can pay rent for more than 1 or 2 more months, and is worried about being on the street as a senior citizen. And luckily, we were able to direct him towards city programs that can help him. But the fact that that's a concern of his, whenever it's supposed to be the time of his life where he kind of doesn't work and worry as hard as he used to, it's really upsetting. And that's why we're running, to represent people like him and to give people like him and my family the voices that they deserve.
Well, we've really walked the walk, and you can see your passion and integrity comes through in a very personal and social way. So
Thank you.
You said you've been working with Melanie on projects here, and tell us a little about yourself.
Here and there, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, well, my name is Melanie Dorigo. I'm running in the 3rd Congressional District,
which is where?
Part of it's northeastern Queens, and it hugs the northern coast of Long Island. So a significant chunk of all of northern and a little bit of mid-Nassau County, and a good chunk of northern and mid-Suffolk County as well. So it is geographically much larger. I mean, it takes a longer time to get there than my other Queens counterparts.
I like that term, hugs.
It hugs.
Hugs
yes,
it. Okay,
yes,
good.
It hugs the shoreline.
So we're all hugging each other here,
it's all about
needing each other. Yeah.
Yeah, building, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I grew up on Long Island. I'm a Long Island native. I did spend about 8 or 9 years in Queens. Started my family in Queens, actually. So I think I have roots in both places and a special place in my heart. I was raised by my grandparents, and they didn't have a lot of money. My grandfather was a union foreman in construction. My grandmother worked nights at a makeup factory. And they struggled to put a hot meal on the table. We didn't always have one. And as a kid, I often went without. I had to wait a long time until money came in to get things like school supplies. And I was the first in my family to go and graduate from college. So, I take all of these experiences of my childhood as really, I think it shaped my empathy moving into my life. And I think like once you've had experiences like that, like, you know, my mom abandoned us, so I have great empathy for people who have less. I have great empathy for under-resourced communities and marginalized communities, and I think it colors a lot of my policies. I also have a master's of science in exercise physiology, so I worked my whole career as an allied health professional, working with patients and families, and ultimately organizations on chronic risk reduction programs, health improvement programs, et cetera. So, you know, this Medicare for All policy, which I just have to give a quick plug, is really healthcare for all. I know that the term can get confusing, but it's comprehensive healthcare for all. I'm fighting really hard for it because I've seen how the insurance industry works intimately. I've seen how it impacts people, people in my district. You know, one of my super supporters, one of my biggest volunteers, he's the one who knocks. He knocks hundreds of doors for us every week. About a little over a year ago, he almost died because his insurance didn't approve this one particular medication. And his wife and, you know, his company came and really fought back, and then ultimately they approved it. But he was barely hanging on. Yeah. And I think that when we, you know, it's important to tell these stories.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, you can talk about these concepts very abstractly. But when you hear about the people in your district and how it impacts them, that makes it real for people. And it's what we're fighting for, right? It's what I'm fighting for in my district. Healthcare is a common concern. The environment, we talked about my district hugging the shoreline. Well, all of us, you know, we all live in coastal communities. We've seen the devastating effects of climate change. So all of us, I'm very proud to sit with my two, hopefully, future colleagues here, because I know we're fighting very hard for climate change solutions. We're fighting for a Green New Deal. You know, we're trying to put people first in a way that we don't typically see in government. You know, my opponent has been in politics for 25 years, and one of, you know, the key differentiators in my race is that he represents the status quo. He wants to keep everything just the way it is. He doesn't want to take a risk. He doesn't want to go out and take a stand on issues. And that's everything from women's rights to immigration to climate change to healthcare, et cetera. And, you know, I'm a mom of three. I have three little kids, 9, 5, and 3. And I look at their little faces and I have to fight for them every day, you know, and there's no way that I'm going to let them be represented by a representative who doesn't want to represent them, who doesn't want to represent me, and doesn't want to represent my district. So I'm really excited. I'm thrilled to join the brand new Congress slate. I'm thrilled to have slate mates like Lauren and Mel, and we are pushing together for something that's really much bigger than all of us. But I think, and I'm pretty confident we can do it. If we keep working as hard as we can, we will turn the tides, and I think we're going to have a lot of surprises come June 23rd.
You've certainly convinced me. You've got the energy. You all do. And Mel, follow up on that one. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Mel Gagarin. I'm running to represent New York 6th Congressional District. What I love about
Which is again now?
It's 100% Queens. Everything from, you know, Ridgewood, Middle Village, Maspeth, to Bayside, a little bit of Richmond Hill, Jamaica, Flushing, Rego Park, Forest Hills, Cougar. I mean, we got all of it, all flavors of the world. In
Briarwood?
In yep, Briarwood.
That's where I grew up. 85th Road, I think it was, and Corona.
Okay. Well, Corona's that's in the Promised Land.
All right.
In the AOC's
so
district.
Yeah, that was the Promised Land. Wait, oh,
yeah.
All right. Well,
Right.
I didn't know it was at that point, but
It
listen,
is now.
I had some wonderful experiences in Queens. So wonderful. A little more. Tell us about
you know,
why
so
you're
I'm running
doing this.
fundamentally. You know, Bernie Sanders likes to say that, you know, we're living under the most dangerous president in American history, but I think it's bigger than that. I think we really are living in the most dangerous moment in American history. I think that the way that our democracy has been attacked and the institutions worn down is bad for the health of our democracy, and that obviously has ramifications for everyday folks in the district. You know, and what we need in Congress are folks that are going to bring some radical honesty and bold policy to start healing the wounds of the middle class, because that's how we got here, right? I mean, Donald Trump is not an anomaly. He's the natural result of a broken, you know, political and economic system. Yeah. And I think folks like my opponent, you know, who still think that there's going to be some common ground that you can work with this president with, are sort of missing the mark. And in that same vein, you know, losing sight of the folks that we're supposed to be helping and fighting for the middle class and for the working class folks. You know, for me, I feel we need folks with that professional and lived experience to be able to move that ball forward. I was born and raised in the district. I'm the son of a Filipino immigrant. My mother is a descendant of Puerto Ricans. She was a nurse that worked a night shift up until she retired 3 years ago. I was raised by her and my abuela in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens, where I lived until I was 18 years old. Then I went down to Washington, D.C., got my BA in political science, and in those days I really wanted to get involved in politics because I always believed that, government had the ability to address social ills. It's kind of special being in this neighborhood because I started my career just 2 doors down at Senator Jose Serrano's office, who used to be just over there.
We're on 104th Street.
Yep.
In
Lexington Avenue in El Barrio.
Yeah.
And then I went to work for a U.S. congressman covering parts of the district when it used to be the 9th Congressional District. So I was a congressional aide, and then ran for city council in 2009, and that didn't pan out. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to go work on these issues that I care about one-on-one. Worked for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Planned Parenthood in New York City. Most recently at a small nonprofit called College and Community Fellowship, working at the intersection of criminal justice reform, higher education, and women's rights. And then I took some time off to raise my 3 children. I have a 13-year-old and 2 young daughters.
3 also.
Yeah, 3's the magic number.
Not yet?
I have 2 fur kids.
Okay. Okay.
For all the cat people out
All
there.
right. So there you go. All right. We need to keep them in mind too. Animal rights. Yeah.
But then 2016 happens, and I start to think to myself, is it time to get back? And 2018 happens, and you think the blue wave is coming, and the Democrats are really going to fight against this president.
Yeah.
And outside of a handful of members of Congress, what I saw was a lot of the same old, right? Seeing the same politics being played out that this president was more than willing to take advantage of because he knows the playbook. And that's how come I'm running on things that are considered radical by many folks, but that to me are common sense. Homes guarantee, making sure that everybody has a roof over their head. Yeah. Because the only way that we're going to address homelessness is to put roofs over people's heads and address the underlying causes. I'm fighting for Medicare for all because look at 33 countries around the world, including the UK, Israel. Everybody has universal health care.
Right.
We're still behind the curve. And 10 years ago, the Affordable Care Act, which was a great compromise, right? This was supposed to be the first step on the way to single payer, and here we are a decade later, and we're having these same arguments again. And I think the American people are tired of being lied to. They're tired of being given lip service. They want to see action. They need it. The vast majority of Americans are behind this policy, and that's what we're going to fight for.
And your opponent has been in office for how long?
This is her 8th year.
8th year.
Yeah, I mean,
and yours has been 25.
Well, not as a Congress, not in Congress, but in local, the local political scene.
And
26 in Congress.
Wow.
Wow. So you're going up against the establishment.
Yeah.
Yes.
You all are. And
right.
you see them as I'm sorry. I didn't,
oh, no, it's okay. Go ahead.
No, so
I love talking about the establishment.
Yeah. Well, tell us about you. You are in a movement that is highly questioning that, right? And how adequate they've been in meeting people's needs and so on. So you believe that you can bring a lot to the table that your opponents, the establishment, has not been able to do, correct?
Well, I don't think that they haven't been able to. They've chosen not to. I mean, my opponent takes
Why do they choose that?
Look,
what's happening?
My opponent takes
I
money
think we
from
could all
Wall
say,
Street.
yeah, corporate money.
Corporate money.
Corporate money?
Corporate money.
It's the money thing.
I wanted to say it at the same time.
Yeah, please. So you all are getting your money from where? Small donations? Just like Bernie?
Yeah.
Yes,
We're people powered.
People powered.
Yeah.
That should be emphasized.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I
No,
actually
go ahead.
introduced an act called the Paid By Act, Politician Accountability Information Disclosures Benefiting You. And essentially what it will be a bill that we hope to pass when we all get there. They've actually co-endorsed it with me. It is essentially would require politicians before taking a major vote or any kind of political ad to disclose where they take money from. Kind of like a pharmaceutical ad.
Terrific.
It's
Yeah,
terrific
yeah.
because
What a
I
great
think
idea.
that the general public or the majority of the public is not aware of how much corporate money is being pumped into political campaigns. And then even if they're who cares? That they need money to run their campaign. Well, yeah, but then they expect a return on their investment. No one's giving you anything for free. And I think this is unfortunately what we're seeing, whether it's the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. There's so much money being pumped in. I think it's why so many Republicans just turn their backs on America. right? Because they want to get paid by their donors. And now we're seeing it in our party too. And I think we have to stop being so partisan about everything. And we can celebrate our tenets, but we have to call out the wrongdoings. And I think that's in large part what this movement is doing. So we can bring government back to where it belongs, with the people.
Like all three of
go ahead,
I'm
yeah.
so sorry.
No, I just want to remind us
Yeah.
all that we're taping this a day after Super Tuesday.
Yes.
And all these dropouts by the establishment. The first thing the Democratic establishment, and then all turning to the donors.
Right.
Well, who's now going to get the money to screw Bernie?
Yeah. Oh, I was
I
just
d-
going to
go
say,
ahead.
all three of our, am I right, all three of our opponents have accepted like defense contractor money.
Yep.
So when all of them voted for the inflated military budget that included Space Force, and whenever we're saying that we don't have money for things like single-payer Medicare for all, it makes sense that they, in their careers, have taken money from the industry that profits off of war.
Right.
So that's the kind of thing that we're fighting against by only accepting influence from people.
Just devil's advocate, they said, well, it's jobs. How are we going to replace those jobs?
I'm running on a federal jobs guarantee, so there is absolutely no reason that we need to cling to war as a job provider. Federal jobs guarantee, I think about my family who became caretakers for a negative amount of money because my grandfather was disabled. And whenever I think about the federal jobs guarantee, I think about people like my family getting a salary for doing what's best for their family. Right. So there's no reason, whenever I think about our opponents and how they haven't advocated for us to make a clean break from endless war, and instead help our economy and help working class people out with things like a federal jobs guarantee and livable wages, and expanding, not just preventing cuts to Social Security, but expanding Social Security benefits and Medicare for all. All of these things, we absolutely have not seen the advocacy that all of us deserve. And I think it's...
How do they get away with it? How do they rationalize it to their constituents? Have they been confronted in the way that you all are now doing, do you think?
It's the sense of complacency. And it's,
By
this
who?
is where,
By
look, there's a sense of complacency by the voters, and then
by the vote,
but there's also
nothing's going to change.
I don't know.
Right? Or what do you mean by
Well,
that?
let's see, right? Because I think that there's also a cynicism in politics that our opponents are really good at capitalizing on. So, for instance, since I've gotten into this race now, almost every week my opponent is putting out a new bill, right? Which, if you don't pay attention to politics, if you it seems like, oh, well, it looks like she's working. Oh, she wants to end homelessness now. Even though the bill itself, 1 is weak, 2 is never going to get a committee hearing, and 3 definitely never getting a vote in an election year. But it's this appearance of, I'm doing this. Oh, and you say
Now,
the same
after
thing.
many, many years.
Right.
This is like
And look, you can pay lip service to the
Bloomberg
issues.
apologizing for stop and frisk.
Look, you can say anything. You
2
can
weeks
say
ago or
anything,
whatever,
and
yeah.
you assume that you're not going to be held accountable.
Right.
But then this is how you end up in this situation where pretty much every member of Congress is getting a challenger, and it's not because we want to be famous or the next AOC. It's because we're calling out those failures, and it's time to hold them accountable.
Right. It's an important point. Yeah, it's beyond your own individual. Examples here, right? So it's a movement that you feel needs to happen. Right? And connect
Well, I
with.
mean, it's common sense. I mean, if we can move through or move past the partisan rhetoric, and look, we're all very proud progressives, but if we can move past that and look at the actual policies at face value for what they are, they're very hard to argue with. Like Lauren's point about the military budget, it was $738 billion that was just passed. Guess how much it cost to end homelessness? $22 billion.
Yeah.
Why is it that we can spend $738 billion on war, but we can't end homelessness in our own country? I think we need a reprioritization of what's important, and I think that's what we're all offering.
It's a value, moral, spiritual issue, if you will, as well. We just have a couple more minutes here for this segment. So tell us that you're collecting signatures. When is the actual election and so on? Tell us a little about the
Yeah, well, petitioning started February 25th, and
Okay.
we have to be filed by April 2nd.
April 2nd,
So
okay.
if anyone wants to
No.
sign signatures, if you
Go
want to
ahead,
sign
yes.
our petitions, we need all the signatures we can get.
Absolutely.
We need 1,250 to get on the ballot, but we need to collect thousands more because we all expect challenges. We
5,000 or so, 4 or 5,000?
as many as
least.
possible,
Many,
at
at
least,
least,
even,
okay.
even more than that. Reach out to the campaigns if you're in our districts, and we will send someone to you.
Okay.
And then our primary is June 23rd, and early voting starts June 13th.
Okay. And they can reach you again? Give us the
website.
minute.
Sure.
or
So it's at melforprogress.com or at melforprogress across any of the social networks.
Okay.
And I'm Dorigo2020.com or Dorigo for Congress on Insta and Facebook, and Dorigo Melanie on Twitter.
Okay.
I'm laurenashcraft.com, and you can also find me on all the social medias at VoteAshcraft.
And this comedy show. No, really.
We have one on March 12th
Where is that going to be?
at QED in Astoria at 7:30 p.m. We would love to have you.
When is this going to be now?
March 12th at 7:30 p.m. in Astoria.
Did you come back and we have a little comedy show here?
Anytime.
Okay. All right, we'll do that, okay? Well, listen, we're going to take a short break here, and then we're going to come back with some more of your colleagues and comrades here. I am so impressed with all of you. Really, I mean that bottom of my heart. You're so articulate, so passionate. Your integrity, your honesty, your drive comes out, and I just want to thank you so very, very much for coming on the Radical Imagination. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
And more than luck, I want you to win. Come back as winners.
We
All
will.
right?
Yeah, we will.
For the
Let's
movement.
do it.
All right,
We
let's
will.
do
Thank you
it.
very much.
All right.
Coronavirus
All
here.
right. No, yeah, we'll watch out for the virus. Thank you so very, very much. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back on the Radical Imagination. On the show, we're looking at radical alternatives. And for that to happen, you first have to have the imagination. You have to have a place where people can come and discuss and feel that it's safe to express themselves. Offering alternative visions of what America could be like that can transform our criminal justice system, our economic system, our political system. I was an anti-war activist. I was involved in the student protests at Columbia University. There was so much going on in the 60s, and we began to face the civil rights movement, anti-war movement, the women's movement. So we need to tackle those same issues in different forms as well today. We're looking forward to joining with the younger generation, with all of us, in this effort, because we can't do it alone. We need to do it together. Hi, this is Jim Vrettos again, Radical Imagination. We're back for our second segment, in which we're going to be talking to other candidates for various legislative and congressional offices in the city here, for the brand new Congress, right? The brand new Congress. So we're going to have Nuala, Samelys, and Sean for this segment. So let's start with you, Nuala. Just tell us a little shortly about your efforts, your career, your interest in running, and what district you're running in, and tell us a little about what your programs are.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me on.
It's great having you all.
My name is Nuala O'Doherty Naranjo. I'm a mother of 5. I've been a long-time resident in the 34th Assembly District, which is in Queens. It's the neighborhoods of Woodside, Jackson Heights, and East Elmhurst. And it's a largely immigrant neighborhood, and that's why I think I'm a perfect person to represent the neighborhood. I'm the first one in my family born in the United States. And you know, as many immigrant families, my family's moved around. So I have brothers and sisters born in different countries, but I was the first one born here in the United States. And I moved to Queens to go to law school, and I really fell in love. Because we moved around a lot as kids, I never felt like I had a home.
With Queens or the law school?
It was St. John's Law, so I fell in love with Queens, though.
Okay,
and
Queens,
what I
yeah.
really fell in love with is the diversity.
Yeah.
And so one day, my mom's car wouldn't work, so I pushed it around the corner of the mechanic shop, and I married my mechanic. And
Good idea, yeah.
so he's from Ecuador. He came across the border in his 30s, and he had 2 kids back in Ecuador. But the way our immigration system works, we had 3 kids before they had their green cards. So I went from 0 to 5 kids in 5 years. I do not recommend that.
Okay.
But what I then dealt with is I saw how I explained the American system to my immigrant mother, and then I had an immigrant husband, And then we brought over his 2 daughters, and
Right.
they came over at 15 and 17
Right.
and had to learn English. And so when we brought them in, being the immigrant family, within 8 hours of them landing at JFK, I was
Yeah.
registering them in school. And we registered them in a school called Newcomers High School in Queens, which is a great school. It's solely for immigrants. And it really helped my struggling immigrant family go through separation anxiety, learning a language with regular teenage angst, and really made sure they passed their Regents exams. So I always say that I have the ultimate Queens family. We're half Irish, half Ecuadorian, and 100% Queens.
And Queens is the most diverse community in the borough, in the city, and in the country, correct?
Yeah.
It is.
So you've also experienced
Yeah, so
immigrant.
oh, absolutely. I'm Puerto Rican and Dominican. I was
Okay.
born in Bayamón, Puerto Rico.
Mhm.
And my name is Samelys Lopez. I'm running for the 15th Congressional District in the South Bronx. And in addition to Queens, the South Bronx is a very diverse community. It's Latino, it's Yemeni, it's West African, it's Black American, it's Muslim. It has a slice of every piece of the world. And in the district that we're in, we're experiencing things like poverty, worker exploitation, immigration raids with ICE. So there's a need to organize people from the ground up to take over the political process. And in terms of my background, I have a background in affordable housing, development and affordable housing finance. And really everything that I've ever done in my life, my professional, personal, academic aspirations has been informed by my early experiences growing up in the homeless shelter system because my mom was a domestic violence survivor. So she worked in sweatshops to make ends meet, working 12, 13 hours a day to survive. Sometimes there wasn't enough money for a babysitter, and she would pick me up from my elementary school and I would do my homework
Which
at
was
the
where?
sweatshop.
Where was your?
It was in Williamsburg,
Williamsburg.
at the heyday of the sweatshops.
Right,
So
right.
sometimes there wasn't enough money for a babysitter, and she would pick me up from the elementary school and bring me to her sweatshop in Williamsburg, and I would do my homework there. So that exposed me
Wow.
to income inequality, worker exploitation, seeing my mom being physically abused. These are things that are not unique to my personal experience and my mom's personal experience. This is something that a lot of people in the congressional district that I'm running in are experiencing. So that informed my commitment to organize for housing justice and to build housing as well. So I'm a housing organizer and activist, and I also dedicated my professional life to building affordable housing in the Bronx and in New York City.
All right, we'll talk a little more about that too. Great. So, Sean, you were in the military. You were a Marine.
Yeah.
And then at John Jay College, graduate, and here you are running in what district?
In New York's 5th Congressional District.
Which is?
Which is the greater parts of Jamaica. That includes St. Albans, South Jamaica, Cambria Heights, as well as the Rockaways and parts of Nassau County, Elmont Valley Stream.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So it's a predominantly working class district.
Right.
It is 50% African American, 20% Latino, and 20% South Asians. So as we talked about earlier, Queens is probably the most diverse place in the part of the world, with over 180 languages spoken.
Yeah.
And for me, like myself and many others, a lot of our lives have been shaped by white supremacy, whether it's foreign or here at home. Both of my parents came here from Bangladesh shortly after the Liberation War in the 70s. And they came for opportunities, but what they found was housing insecurity, being displaced by Islamophobia. And that's really shaped me into who I am as a person. I had to start working at the age of 15 years old because we were at risk of losing our home and our jobs during the financial crisis. And unfortunately, we did lose our home during the financial crisis. We were living in Southern Jersey at the time when this happened. And after we lost our home, we moved to South Jamaica, Queens, and we've been there for 12 years now. And eventually I was poverty drafted into the Marines, thinking that it would be a great way to—
Poverty drafted.
Yes.
Yeah. That
Pretty
explain
much.
that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean—
really no choice.
Yeah, I
right?
had no choice. I had no
Okay.
choice because coming from an immigrant family, there's always this unwritten rule that as the eldest of 3 siblings, I had this duty, this responsibility to provide for my family. So at a very young age, I figured that, the military did have the benefits. Maybe I could help my family come out of our economic disparity. When I came back, I realized nothing had changed. And that's when I started getting more into organizing and going back to school. I am a product of not only public housing, but public education. Went to John Jay College, got a degree in sociology, and that's where I started my political career, I guess you could say. I interned in the New York State Assembly, ended up working there with Assemblywoman Latrice Walker in 2017.
At John Jay.
Yeah,
So
from
the
John Jay,
internship.
yeah.
I see.
Yeah, And then as soon as I got back, I started getting more in political organizing, staffed for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's campaign in 2018. And what I realized in all this is that 2020 is very, very critical, and that the only way we could change the conversation in order for us to make revolutionary change is for working people to be at the table, start making decisions for ourselves.
It may seem like a strange question. As I listen to you three, all of you, how come you're not more embittered or angry or frustrated? I mean, you've got this buoyancy about you, the ebullience and energy about transforming the system. It's so gratifying and it's so captivating. I wonder.
I like all of you on
for
Twitter.
me,
You-
me,
Well, I'm sorry. What were we going to
You
say?
go- you go
No,
first.
go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say that for me and people like
Yeah.
us, I would imagine we have no choice. We have to basically fight and not give up. And we have something that, we're angry about. We have a sense of
Yeah.
indignation.
Channeled in.
And we're channeling it in a very positive way.
Right.
We want to empower our communities. We want to work alongside our communities.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to build local movements that reflect the diversity of our communities, the
Mm-hmm.
needs, and the struggle of our communities. So even though I may, sound, happy-go-lucky, but I think
Yeah,
that
that's what I meant. But yeah, but you
You know,
channeled it in.
we channel it in a very positive way.
Right.
And everything that I've ever been able to overcome, I, have given back to my community, and it has given me a sense of resiliency and inner strength to
And
continue the
determination.
fight and self-determination, right?
Yeah,
To continue
absolutely.
in this path. And I wouldn't be who I am without the guidance of people like my mother, for instance. My mother has a third level education from the Dominican Republic. And I've seen her survive, things that were violent, things that were inhumane. And if she was able to sacrifice and do all these things that she did for our family, there's no reason why I can't step up to the plate and take her suffering and translate that into community activism and electoral power. That's something that I owe to my mom and people like my mom in the community.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a little older. And so for me, I think it's important that anger is important. Because when our president was elected, I, like many people, went into a funk. And it was really hard for me to explain to my teenage children how we elected such a president. And after that funk wore off, I said, we've got to do something. And I said, we have to really use this anger. For too long, we've done nothing. I'm challenging a person who, you can't blame him. He was handed the job, and he's been there for 10 years, and no one's ever challenged him. So if we don't stand up and make these challenges and push forward, if we don't use the anger at what we see the system's doing to step up and challenge it, we'll never move forward. So I think this anger is this great opportunity. I think we saw with the 2018 elections, at least in my part of Queens, we saw this great progressive movement forward.
Absolutely.
My
Yeah,
neighborhood
yeah.
is now represented by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jessica Ramos, Catalina Cruz, people who are really progressives moving forward, and that we've got to take that energy and keep moving. And that's the hope we have. The hope that people are waking up, the hope that people see what's really important, and the hope that we can really make change.
Yeah. The righteous indignation.
Yeah.
Yeah. You feel it too. And
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay to be angry and it's valid, and I think for a lot of younger people, we are trying to really shift the narrative dialogue to really center around working class values, because we see that, for me, as a younger person, I saw that a lot of decisions that were made by adults in legislative office were affecting younger people like me. And now we're in the position to make that change for the next generation. So we see a lot of anger and a lot of passion, motivation, especially on social media as well. That's where a lot of young people do galvanize. But now it's about how we turn all that energy and turn it into the streets. How do we get everybody together to come organize, go knock on those doors, talk to your elders about why making a certain vote for a certain candidate is not good for us as a whole, right? And I think that having that general open dialogue will really create a bridge between a big generational gap that we're trying to really overcome in 2020.
and especially reaching out to young people. At
Absolutely.
first, that's the foundation, would you say?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You start there, and it's there's
I
really.
think it's young people, and it has to be an intergenerational movement as well. The young people learning from our older generation, and the older generation learning from the younger generation as well,
Absolutely.
and meeting each other halfway, because we're a reflection of the communities that we're in, and that's what the communities look like.
At least in my community, there's a lot of common interests. I mean, those common interests are that we need to take care of our neighbors, we need to take care of each other, and we can't do that without health care, right? That we must feel responsibility for everyone, and especially in healthcare, because in healthcare we see that because we haven't been taking care of our neighbors, we have so many other problems, whether it's homelessness, whether it's our criminal justice system failures. We need to see that a lot of that is just a healthcare issue, and we must stand up and address that, which is going to be expensive and hard, but when we address that, we are addressing so many different issues all at once.
So the government needs to be brought into the equation. People aren't, I mean, your families did care for each other and help as much as they could, but there's a limit to that, right?
Well,
Government has a role,
Absolutely.
and that's what you're trying to get people to realize. It's not the problem, but it can be worked with, and the solution is there. It's just that it hasn't been for the masses of people, and working and poor and middle class and so on, right?
And I think that the solutions are already in our communities. I am
Interesting. Okay, what do you mean by that?
representing a community in this organizing work in this election that has bared the brunt of environmental injustice. There's a homelessness crisis in the community. There's a lack of universal child care. So these are things that we're fighting for in our platform, in our campaign. We're fighting for a homes guarantee to combat the homelessness crisis in America and target speculative land practices, land speculation practices that artificially inflate the cost of rent. We're also trying to fight for child care because there's a lot of working families that they leave their kids alone because they don't have any child care, like what happened to me and many other people in the community. And we're fighting so that we can bring a Green New Deal into the community and fight for clean air and clean water. But there are local solutions and community activists and organizers that have organized for generations and have stayed in the community when the South Bronx was burning in the 70s and the 80s because of the landlords that were burning their buildings for profit. And it was the community that we need to stand with, because I'm standing on the shoulder of a movement that has been in the South Bronx for generations.
We've had that show. We've done that show, The Burning of the Bronx.
That's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
And the people who did, as you're saying, stuck it out and stuck together and rebuilt it was. So what you're saying is, you're grassroots organizers who listen. You're advocates. It's not like you're coming in as the so-called experts. You're all college
not at
educated.
all.
From the community.
From the community.
That's the key. It's got to be.
That's the key.
The two words that we're constantly hearing are organizing and the community. We want it to come from the community. At least in my neighborhood, for Jackson Heights, Woodside, and East Elmhurst, the representation that we've had in Albany didn't actually represent us. They represented a machine interest, not the people who actually live there. So for once, we need actually to represent the people who live in the neighborhood. And for too long, that hasn't happened.
And these are largely the Democrats, correct?
Yes.
So you're all running against establishment figures who've been around for a while?
In my case, yes.
Yeah, in your case. How many years?
I mean,
many?
a few years, decades,
Years.
some.
Yeah.
Wow.
21
Some have been in
years.
for
How,
decades.
24?
21.
21?
Yeah.
Yeah, 10.
So it's
But
time.
never challenged in 10 years.
Never challenged.
Never challenged in 10 years. You can't really blame the guy when he was handed
Big
a
sigh
job.
there, right?
Yeah, he was handed a job, and no one's ever challenged him, so he's going to keep the job. But the problem is he owes his loyalty to the person who handed him the job, and not the voters, not the people. And that's why that organizing and that community is so important, that we actually get representation for the people that live in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and when we talk about representation, we're really talking about our lived experiences, because it does matter. And I think that at the end of the day, all our destinies are really intertwined, because we're all fighting against the same exploitative, oppressive system. And when we look at the system as a whole, we're not just challenging, any incumbent. We're taking on the whole system, right? And the people that we're challenging are enablers to the system. So when we look at, how we're not funding things like Medicare for All, but we're able to fund forever wars, it's all about priorities. And what we're asking is just for basic human needs, healthcare, housing, addressing climate change, so that way we have a sustainable future for years to come. That's all we're asking for.
But the problem becomes more than just the Trumps, the Trumpites. It's the establishment, the Democratic establishment. You saw that. We're taping this, as I said, the day after Super Tuesday. And so a number of the candidates, of course, dropped out. And then where did they go?
The establishment.
This time, and combined to gang up on Bernie now.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, so my opponent actually, he early on endorsed Mike Bloomberg for president.
Really?
And was the co-chair for his campaign, which was really disappointing because as someone who experienced stop and frisk, coming from a neighborhood where it's been the epicenter for stop and frisk, it really opened up the wounds of generational trauma that so many people have experienced. And that really just goes to show that a lot of our representatives are really out of touch with what's going on and what people have experienced. And now
You yourself experienced it?
Yes, I have. As a young Muslim, actually, at the age of 17,
Right.
I was coming home from a late night from a prayer
Yeah.
at the mosque, and I happened to be stopped by 2 police officers, and
Right.
they were inquiring me about a neighborhood robbery that was going on, and I told them I had no idea. I didn't know anything about it, but I was 17 years old. I was scared. Eventually, after they found nothing on me, they let me go home, but I was terrified after that.
Yeah.
I just felt like in a country that I called home for my whole life, I felt like I felt so unsafe. And I know that that is the case for so many because there are people who've experienced that at a very young age. And we've become so desensitized to it. So that we need to address criminal justice reform in a more revolutionary way.
Absolutely. Did you hit on some of it at John Jay? Just
Yeah.
curious. How did your professors, how did the students interact on
Yeah.
that particular issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Was there an openness to that debate, or
we always
was there
had-
much?
We've always had a great discussion about how
Yeah.
police are interacting with our communities and what we could do going forward because
Okay.
when we talk about police interaction with the communities, police are up there on the forefront of looking at communities of color as enemies. And we know that a lot of people who do join the police department do it out of trying to make the system better, but the system is not created that way. So what we need to do is come together and demilitarize the police and not incarcerate people for being poor.
Right.
So I think that we need to just look at it at a different lens.
You had a chance to go to an elite college. So how did you manage that, and you came out as a housing?
Right, I actually worked for
expert, you said.
Congressman Serrano as well after
Okay.
I graduated college. And it was really the public schools in my district that I went to that gave me that opportunity to begin with. But it wasn't until I went to college and I was exposed to a different way, a different world, that I realized that I did grow up in a tale of 2-3 cities, right? Because what I saw my
Explain that a
classmates,
little more. This is
what I
really
saw my
interesting.
classmates experience when I went to college was very different than my reality. I didn't encounter people in the college that I went to that experienced homelessness,
Right.
that witnessed domestic violence, that witnessed worker exploitation. I didn't see any of that. So I decided to take history classes, sociology classes, so I can understand the structure and basically fight to level the playing field. And I decided to intern for Congressman Serrano's office through a fellowship that I was selected to be in. And I did housing casework and immigration casework. And there I was exposed to the environmental justice movement in the South Bronx. And after a few years working there, I ended up getting a master's in urban planning with a focus in community development, which is where I learned about affordable housing development and affordable housing finance and how to build it, how to be a part of the creative solution
Well, just
of
also
the
a
homelessness
little bit.
crisis.
Can you just give us a little synopsis of that program that you've been working on?
Which one?
The affordable housing.
Oh, I worked for not-for-profit affordable
Okay.
housing developers, and I was a project manager. So my task was to basically raise money and submit applications to the low-income housing tax credit program to raise funds to build housing and hire contractors and architects to build affordable housing for people coming out of the shelter system and people in vulnerable situations and youth aging out of foster care.
So this is the sort of concrete programs and policies that you want to bring from the Ivory Tower, from John Jay, from other colleges that you've been going to, rather than be, so you are able to do that too as well.
Well, I think the
What
key
is
here
sort
is
of-
education. And
Yeah,
you
yeah.
heard it here.
Yeah.
In New York City, we've had a radical reform in education. For year after year, we've been building on it. But unfortunately, these schools are just starved of money. All right, we've got great local public schools who are working hard
Right.
to really help these children really thrive, but they've been starved. And they're starved because that money doesn't come from Albany, that money's not coming from the city. We need to fund these schools because there's so much potential in those schools. We've got these kids that are in there trying to strive and trying to go forward, but they can't do that unless we actually fund the schools. And for too long,
Yeah.
we haven't been doing it.
So that's one of the concrete plans, policies, or focuses that you will be operating under? As
Absolutely. I mean, I've been working in education reform for 20 years. As
You
mother
have.
of 5,
Right.
I've been through every school, every project. It's really what got me into politics was fighting day in and day out in thousands of hours of school meetings.
Seeing what
And
was
the
happening
end
to your
was
kids.
there's no money in the actual
That's the-
school.
yeah.
And when you go up to the levels, the higher level, the CECs and these levels, you hear the money's not there. And I'm like, why isn't the money there? Because Albany's not providing it. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to Albany and get some of that money because the schools need it, and you will see them blossom once that money comes in. But right now, they're just so starved because it goes back to that hope. I live in a neighborhood that's full of hope. It's full of immigrants. It's full of hardworking people.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
great hope there. But we need to give them the funding that they need, the laws that will help them so they can really thrive. I mean, we've seen some of it coming little by little. The fact that now my neighbors can get state IDs and driver's licenses is so important. The fact that the car wash workers around the corner now can get minimum wage of $15 and not a tip wage.
Yeah, yeah.
These little
Concrete
changes.
services.
And
Concrete
I would also
services.
add to that you mentioned something before about ivory tower. So that's not actually what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
I think that policy
No, yeah,
and
go ahead.
laws should
Yeah.
always come from directly impacted people. Even the Homes Guarantee platform that Shaniyat and I are fighting for, that's a beautiful platform that came together because directly impacted people that were formerly homeless throughout the country, and activists and organizers got together to envision a bold housing plan to combat the decades of racist housing policy enacted by this government by law. And the Homes Guarantee platform is fighting against redlining. And in addition to always being intentional about centering directly impacted communities and their narratives and their experiences, we also need to create the right political conditions for community activism to flourish. In 2018, there was a really bad situation that was happening with the Independent Democratic Conference, that they were 8 Democratic senators that were empowering Republican senators or Republican leadership to have power in Albany. So then many of us in the progressive space in New York City got together to defeat that arrangement because we felt that that was impeding progress. So in addition to creating the right political conditions need to be created so that the movements that are happening on the ground can be amplified, so that the activism can be translated into political action and political electoral power.
Absolutely.
And one thing can
Yeah.
happen with the other.
Absolutely. And my reference to the so-called ivory tower is that you don't usually get that sort of orientation there. And so I commend you for transcending the role that those institutions wanted you to play.
Right.
That's what I was getting
Okay.
at there. Yeah. All right. So I understood on that. Gosh. So again, your campaign is going to be you got to collect signatures,
we
right?
collect- yeah.
You're in the process of that now as well.
All 3 of us are
All
collecting
And
three.
signatures
I-
right now.
All right. So that's the real, real grunt work that has to occur. Door
When
to
you're an
door.
insurgent candidate like I am, fighting
Right.
against a machine
Right, you've gotta do that,
politics,
right.
you know, not only do you have to collect signatures, you know they're going to challenge every single thing.
Yeah.
So I have to fundraise to pay for election lawyers because I know no matter what I do, they're going to challenge me. They're going to try to throw me off the ballot because they never had this challenge before and they're scared. And so that's why we need so many volunteers to go out. But it's the heart of the campaign, this idea of knocking on doors and speaking to your neighbors.
Yeah.
And I think that's what all these insurgent campaigns are about, talking to neighbors, hearing their concerns, and really saying that I want to represent you, not some machine, not some establishment, not some corporate interest, but all those neighbors. And that's why knocking on those doors is so powerful, because it really empowers each candidate to go to elected office and say, no, I knocked on those doors, I know those people, those are who I'm representing, not the guy who wrote me a check from some pharmaceutical company or some corporate interest.
And you have a history of success with that in 2018.
Yes.
So
Oh,
it can be
absolutely.
done.
It can be
So
done.
that
Organizing always defeats entrenched power.
Yeah.
As we've seen with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and we were all organizers for her campaign. I was part of a collective called Bronx Progresses that endorsed her campaign before she won the primary in June 2018, and we helped get her on the ballot, and we knocked on doors for her as well. So organizing is always the magic formula, and beyond the elections, it's really important to continue to build the movement as well.
That's a great point. We have a couple minutes to go because this transcends any one person, even though
Absolutely.
the individuals like a Bernie or a Alexander is so important in this. But that's what we've tried to do on this show too. This goes beyond particular individuals. So what are your hopes? How do you maintain a movement and move it forward at all these different levels that needs to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about building dual power. You know, I don't believe that electoral politics is the end of by all means of anything. I think that we need to continue to organize with grassroots organizers who are putting these issues at the forefront to push politicians to, you know, vote in a specific way. So as long as we center the working people in the movement, that's how we will win.
Right. And you've got to keep the eyes on the prize on that way. And we only have about 30 seconds more to go. So as we wrap it up, tell us again how we can get hold of you.
Right. So my name is Nuala O'Doherty Naranjo, and you can reach me at Nuala4, F-O-R 34.
My name is Samelys Lopez, and you can volunteer for a campaign and donate at lopezforthepeople.com. And I'm running in the 15th Congressional District of the South Bronx.
Okay. And
My name is Shaniyat Chowdhury. I go by Sean for short. I'm running for Congress in New York's 5th Congressional District. Please come out and volunteer. Please donate. You can email us at info@sean2020.com. Find me on Insta or Twitter at Shaniyat2020.
terrific. You guys are incredible. All the best. We're going to have you here again
Thank you for
after
having
you all
us.
win your elections. Okay.
The revolution's coming.
The revolution's here. It's coming. We got to wrap it up. Thank you so very, very much again, Jim Vrettos, Radical Imagination. See you again next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so
Thank
very,
you.
very much.
What a great show.